For millennia, humanity has found ways to traverse the many waterways of the planet. For centuries, worldwide travel relied on the sail to establish trade routes and wage war. In the 19th century, the development of the steam engine and propeller brought about the ability to travel even without the presence of wind. Eventually, in the 20th century, diesel and nuclear power came about and are still commonplace today. Despite these sources being widely used and reliable, this does not stop inventors from attempting to find new breakthroughs in propulsion technology. Previously, we covered the idea of roller ships, vessels with massive wheel-like structures that, in theory, would have been able to negate friction and propel them at incredible speeds. A similar spirit of innovation occurred in the early 1990s in Japan, where a technology was brought about that found much more success than that of the roller ships. This technology was found in the form of the Yamato-1, the world's first Magnetohydrodynamic drive-powered vessel. Although the Yamato-1 was not designed for military applications, there is no denying that war is a massive driver in technological development. The two world wars, for example, contributed massively, even if unintentionally, to advancement in many scientific fields. Even in peacetime, military development has continued, and this new era of weapons technology is front and center in the sponsor of this video, Conflict of Nations. Conflict of Nations is a free-to-play online PvP strategy game set during a Third World War. You can use a variety of units from tanks to jets and naval vessels to compete against up to 128 other players in real time. These matches can last for weeks as you build alliances or invade your neighbors to prove you are the superior strategist. The game is also cross-platform, allowing you to play on both PC and your mobile device. Download the game today using my link in the description to get an exclusive bonus of 13,000 gold and 1 month of premium for free. This is only available for the next 30 days, so don't wait or you might miss it. Huge thanks to them for sponsoring this portion of today's video. Now let's get back to discussing the story of the Yamato-1. Within the world of maritime history, the name Yamato has been associated with great feats, mainly the world's largest battleship from World War II. While Yamato-1 was nearly 10 times smaller than the battleship, her achievements were no less significant. The story behind the vessel begins in the late 1980s with the start of the infamous Japanese economic bubble. While the economy itself was exponentially rising in value due to real estate and stock inflation, this was not the same case when it came to the shipbuilding industry. This recession that the industry found itself in resulted in a decline in innovation and research, and due to this, Japan found itself in a position where the majority of merchant ships and maritime engines had to be imported. Frustrated by the situation, a research committee was brought together with the ultimate goal of building the first full-scale ship propelled by magnetic fields. This type of propulsion is known as a Magnetohydrodynamic drive, MHD, which is a type of device that uses the laws of electromagnetism in order to use a liquid, in this case the seawater, as the propulsion without any need for a propeller. You may have heard this name before, as it is a main plot point for the famous book and movie The Hunt for Red October, in which the titular submarine was fitted with MHDs.
This could be a caterpillar.
A what?
A caterpillar drive. Magnetohydrodynamic propulsion. It's like a jet engine for the water. Goes in the front, gets squirted out the back, only it's got no moving parts, so it's very, very quiet.
This type of propulsion is similar to a water jet, where water is sucked into the system and forced out by an impeller, essentially like how a jet aircraft engine works. However, with an MHD, the impeller is replaced by a magnetic field that is able to interact with the liquid and produce the same form of jet. While Yamato-1 was a groundbreaking project, it was certainly not the first time that an MHD-powered prototype had been developed. In fact, the idea for an MHD had been around since the early 1960s, with the first patent being filed by a W.A. Rice in 1961, in which an electromagnetic pump would be used with liquid metal. It was quickly realized that this idea had potential uses with ships, as water could be used instead of a liquid metal due to its own electromagnetic properties. Working on Rice's original plan, a Lieutenant R.A. Doré proposed that in order to propel a ship, one would need to design an MHD that used a superconducting coil in order to produce a magnetic field powerful enough to interact with water in such a way to propel a ship. Another individual named Stuart Way took a shot at developing his own MHD, claiming that he originally came up with the idea in 1958, but took so long in development due to the overwhelming difficulties that were present. According to Way, for a submarine to be able to use this form of propulsion, it would require a magnet that weighed over 500,000 tons. For reference, this is 5 times as heavy as a Nimitz-class supercarrier. However, his hopes were brought back to life in the 60s with the creation of compact superconducting magnets. These magnets were able to develop extremely powerful fields at the cost of needing to be kept equally extremely cold at negative 460 degrees Fahrenheit, negative 273 degrees Celsius. Despite the need for cooling, these magnets would be substantially smaller and feasible for use in a submarine. In 1966, Way conducted the first trials with a small 10-foot, 3-meter submarine named EMS-1. Unfortunately, while this prototype was able to move slightly, it was ultimately unsuccessful. According to the developers of Yamato-1, this was due to the sub using a regular magnetic coil that had nowhere near the capacity of a superconducting coil and as such could not provide significant propulsion. While the attempt by Way led to a decrease in research towards MHDs, the idea was not entirely discarded. Skipping to the 1970s, the first steps towards Yamato-1 were being taken in Kobe, Japan. At the Kobe Mercantile Marine University, a group of researchers and students led by Yoshiro Saji were hard at work to develop a system powered by a cryogenically cooled superconducting coil. This led to their first prototype named SEMD-1, a small model no longer than 3 feet, 1 meter, but was successful in the use of their superconducting coil in seawater. With this, the group went further to create the larger ST-500 in 1979, itself propelled by a type of MHD that used an external magnetic field. It was with the ST-500 that it was finally shown that MHDs were viable options for propulsion systems. Just a few years later, the Ship and Ocean Foundation founded the Research and Development Committee on Superconducting Magnetohydrodynamic Propulsion Ship in 1985, with the explicit goal of not creating another model prototype, but rather a full-size ship to defy claims that MHDs were too impractical for production use. Saji returned as part of the project and was joined by Yoshihiro Kyotani, who was a leading expert on magnetic levitation trains. In June of 1990, the ship itself was completed, and it was decided that she was to be named Yamato. This was chosen due to the name recalling the Japanese people's great aspiration for ships from ancient times, citing the World War II battleship and even the anime series Space Battleship Yamato. Now that we have gotten through the history, it is time to take a look at the ship itself. Describing the ship as anything but futuristic would be a disservice. Anyone who is a fan of Star Trek would immediately recognize how it looks like a shuttlecraft. To the forward section was the wheelhouse with a nearly 180-degree view of the outside, with the rest of the ship adopting an aerodynamic design. The ship was a total length of 30 meters, 98 feet, with a beam of 10 meters, around 30 feet, and draft of 2.5 meters, 8.2 feet, with a displacement of 185 tons. Due to the ship's usage of the MHD, there were certain precautions that had to be taken into account with how the hull would interact chemically and electrically with seawater, and as such, she was built from an aluminum alloy. This both reduced the weight of the ship, but also did not cause any electrical or magnetic interference due to its non-magnetic properties. The main challenge that was presented to her designers was how to actually incorporate the MHDs into the design itself, as this had never been done before. Obviously, the drives would have to be placed in an area where seawater could easily enter and exit, which necessitated the placement on the underwater portion of the hull. With this in mind, it was decided to create dips in the hull where the thrusters would be placed, with a large hole in the front and rear portions as intakes and exhausts. As seen in this diagram, the pipe from the intake would then split into 6 smaller pipes that sent the water through the main thruster and directly exposed it to the magnetic field. To provide the power needed by the MHDs, 2 diesel generators were placed centrally on the deck above, and one powered either the port or starboard MHD. If necessary, there was an auxiliary diesel generator for emergencies as well. Now for the most important part. What went into designing the MHDs for Yamato, and what were their characteristics? The general design incorporated 6 magnetic coils surrounded by a cryostatic chamber which allowed them to be kept at super cool temperatures. Above and connected to the main cryostatic chamber was a container that held and provided the liquid helium necessary to keep the coils cooled. The coils themselves were placed in a circle-type arrangement with 3 on either side. According to the designers, they chose this option due to the significant difficulties that were associated with trying to create the powerful magnetic field with only one thruster, so instead they placed multiple closely together. It was stated that during testing with only one thruster, they found that it created such a powerful magnetic field that objects from up to a meter away were pulled towards it.
Yeah, bitch! Magnets! Oh!
Obviously, such a scenario would not be acceptable for a ship due to the potential for dangerous objects in the water. Inside the cryostat were 3 layers labeled A, B, and C. C was the outermost and was the layer that was in direct contact with the room temperature air. Layer B acted as the heat shield, which was in a vacuum and acted to keep heat from seeping into the inner chamber. The previously mentioned liquid helium was circulated to grab any invading heat and cycle it outside so that the internal temperature around the coils remained at negative 269 degrees Celsius, negative 452 degrees Fahrenheit. Unlike layer B and C, which were made of aluminum, layer A was made of stainless steel and was the main liquid helium vessel that the coils were wrapped around, itself around the seawater duct and electrode section. When it comes to the coils, each layer was composed of turns, also known as windings, that increased the magnitude of the magnetic field. They calculated that it would need 500 turns for one pair of coil to generate the required power. You can see on this diagram how the entire structure was laid out. One downside of these drives were their size and the amount of equipment necessary to operate them, with almost the entire ship being taken up by the drives, generators, and other various electrical components. Their weight was also excessive, with upwards of 70% of the ship's displacement being caused by the propulsion system. Now that we know about the structure of the drives, let's take a look at the concept that is their main driving force and how it was used to propel the ship forward. The most basic part to understand is that of how electromagnetic force is induced to go a specific direction. This was described by the team as the Fleming's left-hand rule. Open your hand so that the index finger, thumb, and middle finger are all perpendicular to each other. Your index finger will be the magnetic field's direction, while the middle finger will be the electrical current. With these forces, the thumb will be the direction of the electromagnetic force, the force that propels the liquid in the MHD. In the case of a ship, an anode and cathode are installed perpendicular to where the magnetic field is being directed, and as such, the force will act on the seawater that has been given an electrical current by the MHD's electrodes and force it outwards. Yamato-1's MHD system can be seen in this diagram, showing what these forces look like in terms of its design. This type of MHD is called the internal magnetic field type, with the 2 saddle-shaped coils facing away from each other and creating a magnetic field towards the interior of the seawater duct that they are surrounding. Using this concept, the speed of a ship is directly correlated with the electrode current and magnetic field. As you can probably guess, the process that was required before starting the engines was far from simply turning a key. If you wanted to go out for a cruise, you'd have to plan well ahead. The entire startup process must start at least 10 days prior to usage of the MHDs, as it is required to pre-cool the cryostat to negative 250 degrees Celsius, negative 423 degrees Fahrenheit, or else damage will be done to the system. After that, you can then feed in helium to the drives, which takes 2 more days. It is only after these 12 days that you can actually feed an electrical current through their coils. In order to do so, you would have to use the exciting power supply to provide a direct current that could gradually increase the current within the coils to the necessary value. After this, they would then be in their superconducting state but still connected to the external power source. When the targeted value is reached, a switch known as the persistent current switch, or PCS, is turned on so that the circuit would be closed, and the remaining current, known as a persistent current within the coils, has no need for the external electrical supply. It is at this point that you're finally able to set sail. Afterwards, the process of turning off the drives is simply the reverse of what was just done. All of the work put into designing and building Yamato-1 would culminate in June of 1992 when she was finally ready for sea trials. The site chosen for testing was Kobe Harbor, with a strict path so that they would remain in close contact with support boats in case an emergency was to happen. Another unique disadvantage to Yamato's prototype drives was that whatever magnetic field was chosen before departure was what it was stuck with. It could not be increased or decreased once they set off. As such, her crew tested the ship at the currents of 1, 1.5, and 2 Teslas over multiple days. Unfortunately, they were unable to reach the full 4 Teslas that the drives were designed for due to a fault in the PCS. While they were unable to change the magnetic field, they were able to adjust the amount of electrical current that was fed into the field. This allowed them to change the speed the ship was able to reach. At 1.5 Teslas, it took a current of just over 2,000 amps to reach a speed of 4.5 knots, 5.2 miles per hour. At 2 Teslas, the same 2,000 amps was able to propel the ship to just over 5 knots, 5.7 miles per hour. While they were unable to test it, the data was used to estimate that the top speed of the ship would have been 7.5 knots, 8.6 miles per hour in good weather conditions. With the goal being 8 knots, this was a disappointment to the researchers. Despite this disappointment, Yamato still achieved a remarkable feat, sailing under her own power using nothing but 2 MHDs, showing that the concept was viable for propulsion, and as such, she was overall a success. Following the trials, the researchers looked into what could have caused the issues with her speed and the inability to reach 4 Teslas. When it comes to speed, they determined that they had underestimated the amount of resistance that was going to be produced by the action of water being sucked into the drives. A huge amount of water is drawn in on both sides of the ship and then is accelerated within each of the 6 tubes, and when all this is happening, it generates an equally huge amount of flow resistance that was not taken into account when they were undergoing tests of models, and as such prevented the real ship from ever being able to overcome said resistance. In regards to being unable to reach 4 Teslas, the team concluded that the PCS failed simply due to inadequacies. It was still a novel system with the duty of managing thousands of amps of electrical conduction within a tiny structure that was no more than 300 millimeters, 11 inches in diameter, and 365 millimeters, 14 inches in height. Other than the general explanation that the system was unique and relatively untested, they were unable to find a specific cause for its failure at 4 Teslas. In 1992, the Yamato-1 was nothing short of an amazing achievement, a ship propelled by no moving parts and capable of running completely silent. It was able to take an idea that had been proposed over 30 years prior and show critics that such a propulsion system was possible and practical. In addition, the research put into the ship and tests themselves brought about other significant achievements. 2 major ones were the creation of a proper procedure for the operation of an MHD-powered ship, as this had not existed prior, and the manufacturing knowledge of producing lightweight and stable magnets that were capable of generating 4 Tesla magnetic fields. However, looking back at the ship just over 30 years later, we can see that even with her achievement, we still do not have MHD-powered ships or submarines. While research has continued into the technology, especially in military usage for submarines and torpedoes, no full-scale ship has been built since Yamato-1. This is due to the fact that despite our ever-improving technology, there has not been a way to create an MHD that would be efficient to build and operate. These drives require magnets that have to be cooled to extremely low temperatures, and as we saw with Yamato, this process takes upwards of 12 days in advance before a ship can even set sail. This is not to mention the large amount of power and space that is needed to house, charge, and operate the MHDs. The researchers proposed that for a commercial ship to justifiably use these drives, it would need to be able to produce a magnetic field over 20 to 30 Teslas, over 5 times the maximum amount for Yamato-1. Despite these issues, the Magnetohydrodynamic drive remains a promising option for future ship design. Due to the absence of any form of propeller or impeller, these ships would be capable of running with nearly no sound whatsoever and have next to no vibration. In addition, it was found that Yamato-1 produced little cavitation, and as such, the system could be viable for high-speed ships. As with any novel technology that seeks to replace well-proven systems, further research is needed before we see fleets of ships powered by magnets. While revolutionary, Yamato-1 would not set sail again after her trials. Instead, she was placed as an exhibit at the Kobe Maritime Museum where she and her MHDs were put on display. Unfortunately, you cannot go and see her for yourself as she was scrapped in 2016. Despite her untimely departure, her legacy will hopefully continue on into a future where her technology is able to reach prominence similar to that of the propeller, and ships everywhere are able to use magnets instead of standard propulsion. Only time will tell if that is a future we will see. What do you think about this futuristic technology and the Yamato-1? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, or suggest future topics Baron and I can cover in future episodes in this series or one of my other ones. While you're down there, don't forget to check out Conflict of Nations using my link to get your free bonus of 13,000 gold and 1 month of premium for the next 30 days. Thanks again to them for sponsoring this video. If you enjoyed this one, don't forget to drop a like on it and subscribe to the channel. Not only does it help you know when I post a new video, but it helps YouTube know that this video is worth recommending to others. You can also find links in the description to both ways you can support the channel through merch and my partnership with Warbricks USA, which lets you save money on Kobe sets, as well as my other social media accounts you can follow for additional content. Thanks as always to my Conely fans for their support of this channel, and to all of you for watching. That's all I have for you today though, so if you're new to the channel, consider checking out one of these videos on your screen now, and I hope to see you there or on my next video.